What's up, Foxy people? Welcome back to my channel. Today is not a fun, loving, upbeat video, unfortunately. We have to talk about the tragedy that happened with Gabby Petito and the coward Brian Laundrie. Now, I know this case has been heavily documented. This case blew up when it began, and so many YouTube creators and Instagram influencer, everybody was covering it. And I think why it got so much traction is because so many different people had seen them and everybody was able to add a little piece of the puzzle along the way. Now, I have tried to film this video multiple times, and then something happened and I couldn't finish it, and then more information would come out, and then it had been a while and I didn't feel like I had the right to, and so on. It's just been so many times I've tried to film this, but this has been so heavy on my heart that I need to get this out. I lost a childhood friend on Christmas Day this year, and not from the same reasons as Gabby unfortunately lost her life, but it's just a reminder that life is so short and so precious. And Gabby's family actually asks people to continue talking about this so that anybody else that is in that situation can see the signs and hopefully get out of a bad situation. Or if you know somebody that is going through this and you see these signs, you can maybe help them through it. That being said, major trigger warning in this video. There will be talks about signs and whatnot when it comes to DV. Now, I don't want to hear any negative comments about how I'm just trying to get clout or anything like that. My channel's not even monetized right now, and if this video specifically ever were to make any money, 100% of the money would go to the Gabby Petito Foundation. And if you are interested in helping, it is a great organization to donate to. Gabby's family has created it to kind of help others in DV situations and help find missing persons. They saw how important it was to get the community involved. If it wasn't for internet sleuths and social media and stuff, her body may have never been found. And they are very appreciative of that. And they set up this foundation to help police departments and other organizations to kind of push along searches for other missing people. Now, the point of my video, obviously, if you've been following this case, I'm not going to be telling you anything that you don't already know. But because things were coming in so frequently and changing the story is still changing. This all went down in September. It is now January of 2022, and information is still coming in contradicting different things. So because information was coming in so frequently, timelines constantly changed. So I have not seen one video with a thorough timeline. People have put out timelines at the time of filming, and then more information came out and it would change and whatnot. So hopefully there won't be many changes after this, just possibly more information to come out to find out exactly what happened. Honestly, I don't think we'll ever find out what happened because he's a coward. So like I said, this case has been heavily covered. Some fake accounts, I know of one specifically that put out a little clip of being on a boat and said it was him. And when he got called out on it, he just laughed at it. And that's disgusting. People have lost their lives. Families have lost their children. And this isn't something to make a joke about. As for my information, they all came straight from what I consider credible sources. So either straight from the horse's mouth, or two specific channels that I followed that were constantly following this case. Josh at the Dad Challenge podcast, he would do live streams and community involvement, and go through timelines and debunk things or confirm things based on like what other people in the comments had known or seen. So I feel like that really helped put the truth behind this. And then also the Popcorn Planet, as well as the interviews from Gabby's parents. Now I know hindsight is 2020. Now that we know what happened, we can kind of read between the lines when it comes to certain clips that were put out or footage or Instagram. But at the time, before we knew exactly what happened, that's what I mean. You need to be able to see the signs and realize that online things may look perfect, but behind closed doors, you never know what's happening. Nobody is going to post the bad stuff online. Nobody's going to post, hey, my eyes look swollen because I was just crying because me and him got in a fight. You know what I mean? Like, nobody's going to post that. Everybody's going to post about the happy, loving adventure that they're having. One disclaimer I'm going to make is that everything in this video is for education or entertainment purposes only. Unless these facts have been proven to be true, then they are all alleged and they are all just theories of what I and everybody online assumes. So I'm going to do this full timeline. I'm not going to do any deep dives into any specific points. I will link a ton of information, videos, articles, etc. down in the description box. So if you do want to elaborate more on these points, that's where you'll get the information. And I'm going to try really hard to keep my personal opinion out of it. So enough with that long intro. Let's get into what I hope is the final timeline of Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. Buckle in, kitty cats, because it's going to be a long one. So Gabby Petito, 22, and Brian Laundrie, 24, lived in New York. They met in high school and they became friends and bonded over outdoor living, traveling across country, and whatnot. Gabby's parents divorced when she was extremely young. Her dad, Joe, remarried Tara, and she has been in Gabby's life since Gabby was 1. Then Gabby's mom, Nicole, remarried Jim, and he has been in Gabby's life since she was 2. So basically, Gabby's entire life, she's had 4 parents, and they co-parented perfectly. They're very close-knit, and Gabby had multiple siblings from both sides. She wanted them all to live in one big house and be one big happy family. That's how well they all got along. So about a year or 2 before this all went down, Gabby and Brian actually took a cross-country road trip in her tiny Nissan Sentra. They left as friends, and they came back together and in love. At some point, Gabby and Brian actually moved back to Florida to stay with Brian's parents. And then Gabby's dad and stepmom also moved to Florida just to be closer to Gabby. Now keep in mind here that Gabby lived with the Laundries for over a year. They were going to get married, so Chris and Roberta were going to have Gabby as a daughter-in-law. This is going to come in very, very important later, but they were very close at the time. Just keep that in mind. Their previous road trip started in Florida, went to California, stopping in places and documenting South Carolina, Georgia, Oregon, and so on. Gabby wanted to be an online travel blogger influencer. She posted all the stops that they made at all the national parks. Even in the previous road trip, she would do this. And she even started a YouTube channel called Nomadic Static, and her goal was to make this her full-time job. She quit her job to go traveling across country, and she wanted to become an online travel blogger and just post about this and be an influencer and make money that way. And she was very dedicated to this. She would spend a lot of time working on the blog, working on the website, working on her YouTube channel, and so on. Brian also loved outdoors and everything nature. He was actually, like, in his Instagram posts and stuff, he actually totally talks negative about mankind. Basically, he hates mankind. And we'll get there. But their Instagrams were very different, and you could tell. So Gabby's was always nature and fun-loving and pretty short captions. However, they were always tagged with their location, and they almost always had hashtags as well. And then Brian's Instagram, on the other hand, his was a little darker by the cartoon pictures he posted or drew, as well as the statuses and captions he would post. He wanted to live a plastic-free life and just be one with the earth, basically. Even the books he was reading were a little questionable. Now listen, my nephew loves to share his artwork on Instagram, and we love seeing it, but it is nothing like this. And again, hindsight 2020, but all the blood and gore and just dark stuff and the captions that go along with some of them. This one, There's Something in the Trees, isn't so bad, but then these ones start talking about the Trinity and just weird stuff. This was a fun one. I want to give them little bodies with blood spraying from their necks, a lot of gore, maybe an axe or a chainsaw. Okay. Reading is different than any other consumption of media. It takes more effort than staring at a screen half alive. It allows you to use your brain rather than melt it, and there is no author more stimulating than that guy. How Man Treats One Another. Grim Reaper leading sheep to the slaughter and a mousetrap. And then the books he was reading too. This one's Annihilation. They also loved Fight Club. And then this lullaby one that is apparently about, like, this is the caption he wrote about he'll never forget the name Rant Casey, who is a traveling serial killer. And he would also comment about how he doesn't like to use bookmarks because of the precious words on the pages in books. But again, hindsight 2020. If we didn't know what was going on and we just saw somebody, like, I'm not saying that if you read crime stories or whatever that you're a bad person, because you're not. I'm obsessed with true crime and I would never hurt another human being. So it's not to say that just because he read these books that he was dark and twisted. Like I said, now that we know what happened, we are all kind of reading into that. Now, Brian's Instagram page has been taken down, but even the main caption here, take a hike every day. Bug bites are better than being brainwashed by the media. Nature enthusiast. And a lot of his captions were all about stuff like this. As well as we know that he did have some mental illness that very well could have played into these dark thoughts. So in 2020, the couple actually got engaged. And they were so excited. They were posting about it. They were all happy. However, before they took off on this latest road trip, they broke off the engagement. Gabby's mom said it was just because they said that they were too young. They continued dating, obviously, but they just thought they were too young. They didn't want to worry about the stress of wedding planning and whatnot. They kind of just wanted to live their life and travel and just enjoy life and not worry about having a wedding. So they broke off their engagement, but they were still dating. Now, they would still refer to each other as fiancés and tell people that they were engaged. So I don't understand that. But I also wonder if another reason that they broke off the engagement is that there were some red flags in the relationship before the road trip even happened. Gabby's friend came out saying that Brian would take Gabby's ID and hide it so that she couldn't go out with her friends. And if she was hanging out with her friends, he would like call and just try and fight with her. He was very controlling, it sounds like. So like I said, their previous road trip was in Gabby's tiny Nissan Sentra, and they wanted to do another road trip, a longer one, but not in a tiny car. So she actually bought a white Ford Transit van, and they converted it. The whole back of it was like a bed and a whole living space. Now, they do have like their tent and stuff, so they would sleep outside a lot of the nights, but this was for, say, bad weather maybe or whatnot. They did have a bed and living conditions in the back of the van, and they were so happy about it. Gabby was so excited about how it turned out. She was so proud of it. So besides converting the van, Gabby was actually planning this trip for a year and a half. She was saving up her money. She was planning where they were going to stay. She was planning which route they were going to take. She put in a lot of work on this trip, and that is why basically the main reason why her parents had no problem with her doing this 4-month trip. That and the fact that they had already done one before and everything was fine. So on July 2nd, they left Blue Point, New York after Gabby's brother's graduation, and they started off on their 4-month road trip across the country, and they were supposed to end on Halloween. The couple traveled through Kansas, Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. And there's Instagram posts all along the way at all the national parks, and once again posting about how beautiful it is and how much they love it and this and that. Now, the Instagram posts are very interesting, and like I said, I'm not going to do a deep dive. If anybody's interested, I will go through and analyze all of them, but it seems very weird. A lot of the captions were edited after she was reported missing, and I don't know if that's because her account actually went, like, it got taken down for a day or two, and Instagram said that was on them. They did it. It wasn't like any hacking or anything like that. It was Instagram that did it. So I don't know if because that, like, when it got taken down, it shows that, but not all captions show that it was edited. And some of the captions are short, sweet, to the point, and definitely sound like Gabby's older posts. And then some other ones are long paragraphs and talking a lot about Brian and tagging him multiple times and talking about like nature loving, barefoot, plastic free kind of life. So I don't know if he had access to her account. It does seem that way, as well as a lot of people in the comments have said that's how it sounds as well. Now, everything seemed peachy keen, loving life, happy couple, everything that like Instagram always looks so nice and beautiful, including the post from August 12th, which is where we first get a glimpse behind the closed doors. So on August 12th, the couple took a hike at 7 a.m. up to the Arches National Park. And then from 9 till 3, they were at the Moonflower Co-op in Moab, Utah. Now, no one knows for sure exactly what they were doing for 6 hours. Theories are that they were charging their devices. Gabby was working on her blog. We don't know exactly what Brian was doing, but I looked at pictures of the area, and there are hiking trails and a campsite across the street. So it's very possible, and I do think he was probably out hiking while she was working on her blog, because there is a comment about his dirty feet getting in the van. Now, Brian would later say that he just wanted to get to this one place to get fresh water, and that's really, like, even in the next topic we're going to talk about, he says multiple times, like, can I go here? When can I go here? I need to get this water and whatnot. So it seems like he was probably rushing her. He got his hike out of the way, and then he was probably rushing her and just wanted to get on the road, get out in nature, and not sit in a little cafe for longer than the 6 hours they've already been there. Now, before leaving the Moonflower, they started to argue. And this argument sounds like it took a turn for the worse. It was so heated that 2 different witnesses ended up calling police and reporting domestic disturbance. The one police call that was leaked has the gentleman stating that they saw a male hitting a female, and then they got into the van and drove off. Now, we do get body cam footage of this conversation a little bit later, and Gabby explains it as Brian was holding her phone and her keys and wouldn't let her in the van. She was worried he was going to drive off, so she was getting a little feisty and like fighting him to get into her house, basically. And not just that, it is her van. We have to remember this. It is her van. He technically has no rights to this, so he should have never been able to hold her keys like away from her. So by the sounds of what happened, they were getting ready, packing up, ready to get on the road, and Gabby was a little frustrated. She was trying to clean up the back of the van, she says, something about like he threw the groceries in there or something, got his dirty feet in the van, so it was a mess. And she was trying to clean up, and she was getting a little frustrated, and she would tell the police officers that she was apologizing because she knows that her mood can be a little off-putting, and she can like get really OCD and just negative, and she was apologizing to him for this. Now here's where the DV signs really start to come into play. I don't think any person should have to apologize for getting upset that someone messed up your area. Like, that just doesn't make sense. So if this is the correct story, she had a right to be upset. She had a right to be angry and negative that he got his dirty feet all over their van, or he just threw the groceries or whatever. He made a mess of it. Now, I'll actually pop up some pictures here. This is what the van usually looks like, and this is what the van looked like on that day. So obviously it is quite messy. And she has self-diagnosed OCD. So I understand what that's like. You like things in a nice, organized area. And listen, I love my husband with all my heart. Love my kids with all my heart. I would do anything. I would take a bullet for them and everything. However, if I had to live in a tiny little van and spend 24/7 with them for 4 months straight, well, at this point, they've only been about 5 weeks, but still 24/7 in a crammed little area, messing up my space, I'm gonna snap. I'm gonna be negative too. I'm gonna freak out. And if any of you disagree, you're lying. So I get it. I understand she was in a grumpy mood. He was probably rushing her because he just wanted to get on the road, and she was spending 6 hours working on her blog. Now, she would also say that he doesn't believe in her. This is how she feels, that he does not believe in her blog that she can do it. She says this, and he even makes a comment about she was working on her tiny little blog and she wants to do this thing, and like, you could tell he was not supportive in any way. And again, to play into that frustration, I get that. When I started my channel, some of the closest people to me, whether they said it outright or not, didn't seem like they supported me, didn't seem like they thought I could do it. And I mean, I'm not trying to become a millionaire or anything like that. I'm literally just trying to help people. That is what my channel started to be. But just having your loved ones not believe in you and not believing that you can do something, that's heartbreaking. So if she's already frustrated, and then he's making these sly little comments and little remarks about her tiny little blog and this thing she's trying to do, that's gonna add to the frustration. So anyways, tempers are heated. He's stopping her from getting in the van. He has her keys, he has her phone. He will say that he was just trying to keep them separated. He says that he had it and he was just telling her, like, let's separate, let's take a minute by ourselves and then calm down and come back together. But then it also comes out that he got into the van and locked her out. So she's freaking out, thinking he's gonna drive off. He has her phone. He put her backpack on the back of the van so she had her personal belongings. But this tiny little thing is in the middle of nowhere, and you're going to take off with her house and her vehicle? No, no, no. So this tiny little thing climbed in through the driver's window. Ain't leaving her now, are ya? So anyways, they got into this argument. They got into this fight. The one witness said that in the police call that they physically saw the male hitting the female. That was the description. Got in the van, drove off. At 4:45, a Moab police officer was driving down the highway behind a white Ford Transit, and this van started driving erratically. It was speeding something like 50 in a 15 or something. So the cop had already been watching them, and then they pass over the double line and hit the curb, and that's when the police officer put his cherries on, and pulled him over. Now, mind you, this officer had not gotten that witness statement yet. They did not get that call. They were only pulling them over for driving erratically. Now, the body cam footage has been released, and I'm going to link that down below because it's an hour and 45 minutes long. And like I said, I'm not going to deep dive into any clips, any footage, any information in this video. Lots of people have dissected it. Lots of people have opinions on how the police officers handled this. Now, what I will say is that I absolutely believe that the police officers missed a ton of signs. I think when officers are called to a domestic incident, that they should have some sort of psychologist or somebody that is like specializes in these situations so that they don't miss these signs, or they need better training. Again, because hindsight is 2020 and we know what happened. Obviously, we're watching this footage and we are picking up on the red flags and we're picking up on the signs and saying, how did you miss that and whatnot. But when you're in that situation and you don't know these people and you don't know what happened previously, you're obviously just going to base your opinion on what's happening now. And let me tell you, Brian was quite the charmer. So I'm going to try really hard to not give my opinions and not deep dive in this and just give you kind of the facts. Like I said, I will link the full videos down below, and there are a ton of people that have dissected it. So when the officer approaches the car on the passenger side, Gabby is crying. She's visibly upset, and Brian's driving. And so the officer asks her, what's going on? Why are you crying? And she immediately says, we were fighting. I'm sorry, I distracted him. She started taking all the blame onto her. It was all her fault. She distracted him while he was driving. She even at one point says that she hit his arm and caused him to swerve. Everything was her fault. So the officer took her out of the van and had her sit in his vehicle in the cool air, have some water, calm down, and whatnot, and basically just separate them, obviously. Get her side of the story and then get his side of the story. As he was putting Gabby in his vehicle, the second officer showed up, and he's the one that got the call from the witnesses. And he even tells Brian, hey, we got a call that a male was hitting a female in this vehicle. And the look on Brian's face, it was like a deer in headlights. Like, he got caught. And then the second officer ends up saying something and distracting Brian, and he looks away and was able to kind of like regain his composure. I feel like you can just see it in his face, and I feel like if they would have just kept the silence for like 2 more seconds, 20 more seconds, Brian would have cracked. But again, because we know we're going to dissect it, right? So he asks him about it. Brian says, no, like I pushed her. She was hitting me, so I kind of like just pushed her. Like, he even says, I know I shouldn't have put my hands on her, but she was hitting me. They even mentioned that he has some cuts on his face, and he says it's because she had her phone in his hand. Contradiction number 1. She had her phone in her hand, and she was hitting him, and that's where the cuts came from. But then remember, Gabby's story is that, and Brian will also say, that he had her phone in the keys. And anyways, that's how the cuts got on his face. And he says, yes, I did kind of push her just to separate, not pushed her hard, just kind of pushed her to separate her and say, let's take a break, let's separate. Now, in the second body cam footage that was released of the second officer, he's talking to Gabby and gets her side of the story. And he even mentions that she has some marks on her and asks her if he hit her. And oh my God, my heart breaks for her, because you can just see her trying to figure out what story she's going to tell these officers. What story is going to get him in less trouble so that he doesn't get mad at her. So she takes full blame. She says she was hitting him and she was just mad and upset at the situation, and it was all her fault. And the officer even says, like, did he hit you? It's okay. He says, it's okay if you're saying he hit you because you hit him first, and he had to basically coax it out of her.
Is there something on your cheek here? Looks like, did you get hit in the face? Kind of looks like something like hit you in the face. And then over on your arm, shoulder, right here. That's new, huh? It's kind of a new mark.
Yeah, I don't know.
Can I see the other side of your face? So, what happened here and here?
I'm not sure. It was a first thing really fast. I was just trying to get in the back of the car and his backpack was on the back. Got me.
So the backpack got you? So there's two people that came to us and told us that they saw him hit you. There's two people saying that they saw him punch you. We're just independent witnesses by Moonflower.
Well, to be honest, I definitely hit him first.
Where'd you hit him?
I slapped him.
You slapped him first? And then just on his face?
You get to kind of just shut up.
How many times did you slap him?
Just a couple.
And then what? And his reaction was to do what?
I hung on, so I didn't slap him.
He just grabbed you?
Yeah.
Did he hit you though? I mean, it's okay if you're saying you hit him, and then I understand if he hit you, but we want to know the truth if he actually hit you.
I guess, yeah, but I hit him first.
Where did he hit you? Don't worry, just be honest.
He like grabbed my face, like, I guess. He didn't like hit me in the face, like he didn't like punch me in the face or anything.
Did he slap your face or what?
Well, like he like grabbed me like with his nail, and I guess that's why it looks. I definitely have a cut right here, cause I can feel it.
Yeah.
When I touch it, it burns. But
okay. So has he been drinking?
no, we don't drink.
Okay. What was up with his driving? This officer said he hit a curb
I hit him.
while you were driving.
Well, he was driving.
While he was driving, you were hitting him.
Well, not a lot, but yeah.
But that was distracting him while he's driving. Are you
Not only for like a second, only because I saw the lights come on, and I like kind of like.
I know I said I wasn't going to insert clips and whatnot, but nobody can explain that into words. You have to see that part for yourself. So he basically coaxed it out of her. He coaxed the answer out of her. You could tell that she was terrified to even admit that. Meanwhile, the whole time, Brian and the officer are laughing about how crazy their girlfriends are and how psycho they are, and it's disgusting. So of course their stories kind of match up, but kind of don't. They're kind of convoluted, whatever. So the officers can't figure out what to do. So the second officer ends up going into his car and he calls one of the witnesses. Unfortunately, it is not the one that saw the male hitting the female. So he was asking what he did see and if he did see any physical violence. And this witness said that he did see her kind of pushing up on him. So they then decided that she was the aggressor because she admitted to hitting him. He admitted that she was hitting him. The witness admitted that she was hitting him. And nobody's admitting that he touched her. She's now the aggressor. They were so focused on who to charge or who not to charge or how to let this go or whatever that they missed so many times. They forgot. They clearly forgot that she had marks on her too. They clearly forgot that the one witness said the male was hitting the female. They clearly forgot that she admitted that he hit her. They were so wrapped up in trying to not send this poor little thing to jail, and they were so like smitten with him that everything got mixed up. So basically they decided that they weren't going to charge anybody, but they were going to separate the couple for the night. And while they were explaining this to Brian, they said, like, we can get you a hotel. He says, I have no money for this. Put a pin in that. It's going to come in very handy later. So he has no money for a hotel. And they said that he goes, can I just go camp? Can I go to this place I've been wanting to go all day? Can I just stay out there? And they were like, well, you could, but we can't really tell you that. So they ended up getting him set up at a hotel, and it was through a DV support program that paid for it and whatnot. And they ended up letting her stay in the van overnight. But even when they were talking about the separation and they were talking about like possibly needing to take Gabby to jail for the night. Brian's like, well, can I just go to jail instead of her? And obviously the officers were like, well, we can't do that. We can't charge you with anything. He goes, oh, I'll take your radio, and like just joking around with them, making it seem like he doesn't want to press, like he even said, I don't want to press charges. I don't want her to get in trouble. It was nothing major. Like he didn't take any blame for anything. Everything was on her. She was the crazy one. And like he just went above and beyond to prove that like he's so innocent. It's just, I can't even like watch the body cam footage. It's really, really telling, especially since we now know what happened. And this is what I mean. If you watch that and this sounds familiar in any way, get help. Please, please get help. No, I said I wasn't going to put my personal opinions and stuff into these. There's so many signs and like so many contradictions and lies. At one point, the officers mentioned something to Brian about a phone, and Brian says, oh, I don't have a phone, but then pulls out a phone and starts using it right in front of the officers. And Gabby was on the phone in the cruiser, or on the phone in the back of the cruiser, so obviously it's not her phone. So yeah, you had a phone. And even when the officers were separating the couple at the end, and they asked like if they wanted to say something to each other, Gabby said, make sure you have your phone charger, and that I love you and we'll see you tomorrow, whatever. Another important point to remember is that when the officers mentioned to Gabby that this was the plan, they were going to separate them for the night, Gabby freaked. She went from calmer to like back to hysterics. She did not want to be separated. She begged them, like she did not want to be alone. She did not want to be separated from him at all. Like, please, is there anything we can do? That kind of stuff. Now this is going to be interesting in a little bit, but just keep that in mind. She did not want to be separated from him whatsoever. And this is the one opinion I will put into this. A lot of people are going after these officers, saying that they could have done something to change it. And yes, although I agree that they missed a ton of signs and kind of got like schmoozed by Brian, I don't think they could have done anything different to change the outcome of what ultimately happened a couple weeks later, because of the fact that Gabby was so persistent and so like insisting in not separating. Whether she went to jail or they charged her or whatever the case is, even if the officers did everything in their power to separate the couple for the night, which they did, but separate them for a while, charge her, not charge him, anything like that, they were going to get back together, obviously. So there's nothing these officers could have done that would have changed the future. Possibly have her talk to someone to read the signs and maybe look into it more, but seriously, what could they have done? So a law enforcement agency has launched an investigation into the Moab police. You can either pause to read these, or of course I'll link the article down below. So basically they said Gabby was very likely a victim of long-term DV. However, the officers made a ton of unintentional mistakes through this stop, but really the only thing they did wrong was not arrest Gabby. That's the only thing they could have done, because they didn't have proof that Brian was the aggressor. All signs pointed to Gabby being the aggressor. So really the only thing these officers did, besides not having proper training, which they are now going to have, the only thing they did wrong, technically, was not arrest Gabby. And personally, I don't believe if they did actually go through and cite her that it would have changed anything for the future. The couple was obviously going to get back together, because you saw how anxious Gabby was about being separated. Now, Officer Pratt, the second officer, actually, so both officers have been suspended, but he actually took some time off when news of Gabby's demise broke, because he was completely shocked and devastated because, of course, you're going to think, could I have done anything different? And he even said if he knew Brian was going to do this, he would have taken his own personal vacation time and followed that van around up to Wyoming and made sure, like, intervened any situations that Brian would have had or any opportunities Brian would have had to do what he did. Obviously, like, they even said they were only basing their opinions off of what was going on at the time. Obviously, now everybody is looking at it hindsight 2020. Again, I've said it 17 times this video, but he even said, like, yeah, we're looking at it now differently, but at the time, I had to look at it as this little 100-pound girl crying because she was aggressive to him. So we don't know where Gabby stayed with the van that night, but the officers did take Brian to the Bowen Motel in Moab, which was actually right across the street from the Moonflower Co-op, which they just spent 6 hours at, and Brian wanted to get out of that area. So, karma? Like I said, we don't know where Gabby stayed. We don't know if they even stayed apart for the night, or how they got back together, or when they got back together, etc. Those facts, those tidbits of information are still up in the air. But either way, we do not have that information. We know that they were separated on the 12th, and they were absolutely back together at some point on the 14th. Now, what I find very interesting from this footage is that when they got to the hotel, Brian actually mentioned to the officers that he's supposed to be on medication, but he doesn't take them. He doesn't say what kind, but he says he doesn't take them because he doesn't like the way they make him feel, that he doesn't get in the right headspace. Now, the only time I've heard medication be described like that, it's for some sort of antipsychotic or anti-anxiety, anti-depression, more antipsychotic mental illnesses. So he has a mental illness that he's unmedicated. Whether that plays into the story or not, we will never know. But I think, like I was saying previously, that lumped with the disturbing stories he was reading and posts he was posting, it does sound, my theory, or my conjecture, it does sound like a recipe for disaster. On August 13th, Brian posts to his Instagram a picture in Moab at the Arches, ranting about some eco mumbo jumbo. Humans are primates, great apes in fact, but I don't know all how great we are as a species. Chimpanzees share 98.8% of their DNA with humans, our closest living relative, but as I see it, every living creature is in some way our relative, even trees. Only 800 million years ago, animal cells started appearing on Earth, comprised of mainly the same parts and following the same functions as plant cells, requiring oxygen, solar energy, minerals, nutrients, and water. This tree was surviving in only inches of soil in an area of extreme heat and drought. The caption goes on, but I don't have a picture of it. And it goes on to talk about, like, legit how mankind is destroying the Earth and the planet, and we all suck, basically. And I can't find it because, unfortunately, Brian's Instagram page has now been deleted. So there is no other posts, updates, sightings, texts, calls until August 17th. So we don't know exactly what was going on in the meantime, what was going on in these 5 days. However, we, the Internet Society, do have a theory of what Brian was up to in these days. Yes, I look different. It's the next day my battery died. Told you it was going to be a long one, and we've barely even begun. So let's get back into it. You cannot talk about Gabby and Brian case without talking about Kylen and Crystal. Kylen Schultze and Crystal Beck Turner were a newlywed couple living in Moab, Utah. Crystal worked at McDonald's and Kylen worked at the Moonflower Co-op. She was actually working on August 12th when Gabby and Brian had spent 6 hours there. There's no confirmation that these couples ever met, but there's a lot of coincidences and a lot of theories that they absolutely came into contact with each other. On August 14th, Kylen and Crystal did not show up to work, and Kylen's dad called the police, the Moab police, and reported them missing. And the police really didn't care at first. They did nothing. They assumed that the couple just took off and were out on an adventure, not answering their phones, whatever, because Kylen and Crystal were also outdoorsy, loving life, living off the land kind of thing. So the police just assumed that they had taken off. But Kylen's dad knew there was no way this was possible, because they wouldn't just not let anybody know. They would never miss work. And their vehicle, so they had their one vehicle with them at the campsite, but they also had a van life. So they had a van and a motorcycle that were still parked in town. They would have never left town without, especially the bike, apparently. So Sean Paul, Kylen's father, begged the police to do something about it. So the police finally went out and searched a couple hours and couldn't find anything. Said there was nothing. He even told them where their campsite was. There was nothing. Then on the 18th of August, he had put out a Facebook post saying, like, hey, my daughter and daughter-in-law are missing. Somebody please help. The police are not interested in helping. And one of their family friends went out looking. She just felt it in her heart that she had to do this. So she was going out until she either ran out of gas or ran out of steam, whatever. She was going to do everything she could. She ended up spending 5 hours, and she found their campsite. And she found Kylen floating in the nearby river. Apparently the campsite was like, the Gatorade bottles and everything were just thrown all over the place. Their rabbits were still in their cage, had not been fed or anything. So clearly they have been left alone for quite a while. So she walked down to the riverbed. She found Kylen floating face down in the water. Immediately called the police and called Sean Paul, and Sean Paul said, get in your car, wait for the police to come. You don't know if this person is still here. So she did, and apparently she waited like a while for the police to even show up. They finally showed up, went down, found Kylen's body, and went a little bit further. And the way she explains it, I'll leave her interview down below, the one I watched. The way she explains it is that the officer walked back up, and Cindy Sue said, is it Crystal? And the officer just said, and couldn't even talk to her. It was like, she explains it as like he was just so distraught at what he saw. And we do find out later that these murders were very brutal. Both girls were shot repeatedly, and one of them had their shirt pulled up and their pants pulled down, I think. Either way, very, very brutal, very nasty. Now, when reports about Kylen and Crystal first being found, they did mention that one had their tank top pulled up and one had pants pulled down. Never said who that belonged to, but they never came out confirming any SA issues. Now, Sean Paul, as well as this poster that I found, definitely confirms that they were SA'd. So you think, okay, found the bodies, that the police would be right on top of it trying to search for the person that did this, right? Nope. As we can tell, Moab police just don't know what they're doing. So Sean Paul actually had to sit outside of this campsite for over a month. He set up a little tent begging anybody that had any clues, that had saw anything, to come forward with information. So the time of death came out as being the night of the 13th into like the early morning of the 14th. Now there was a wedding at the campsite as well, and people were like, I'm sure there's pictures of, like, you take pictures at a wedding, right? You take, especially in a scenic area like that, you're going to take outdoor pictures. Maybe there's a random car in the background. Maybe there's something that does not belong. The police should be looking into this. And Sean Paul actually reached out to the bride and groom, and they were more than willing to share the contact list with the police. And the police they didn't care. They didn't look into it. They didn't take it, whatever the case is. When news broke about the Gabby and Brian situation, so mind you, this is August 18th. Gabby and Brian are still out living their life, right? So when news broke about Gabby being missing and the story that played out, police immediately said, nope, Brian had nothing to do with this, and just shut down all suspicions of that. Because everybody was questioning, like, the couple was just there. This is kind of funky. And even though the residents of Moab say there has not been a murder in like 20 years or something, like nothing like this. And it's just really convenient that all of a sudden this happens, right? But they just shut it down immediately, and they wouldn't even tell anybody why they shut it down. They just said, no, it wasn't him, move on. But they would tell the Moab community and the people that lived in Moab, like, but you have nothing to worry about. You are safe. There is no danger to you. But how can they say that if they don't know who this is? And it's not even like you could say, well, it's not the same cause of death, because Gabby's body wasn't even found when the police were saying this. So there was absolutely there's nothing there to say that Brian was not involved. Now, recently, more evidence has come out stating that they absolutely, very, very, very possibly came into contact with each other. So not only was Kylen working the day that the couple was at Moonflower, and then Brian also was told that somebody witnessed this altercation at Moonflower and called the police. Then there's also the hotel that the police brought Brian to, that Bowen Motel, right across the street from Moonflower. The night of the 13th, Kylen and Crystal, the last time they were seen, they were at Woody's Tavern playing pool and having some drinks for a friend's party or whatever. And they even told their friends that there's a creepy guy camping next to them, and they were debating changing campsites. They didn't explain what this guy looked like or whatever, just said that this guy gave them the creeps. There's been footage pulled from Woody's Tavern, and there's nothing, like, you can't see Gabby or Brian. There is surveillance of like Kylen and Crystal being there, but they didn't really look into anything else, or nothing else has come out of that. But Sean Paul did say that he was told that Kylen was playing pool with a young couple that night. Mind you, that could be anybody. I understand that, but it's just so many coincidences. So Woody's Tavern was a 7-minute walk from that Bowen Motel as well. Obviously, Brian wasn't still there the night of the 13th because that resource center set him up, right? So they only would have set him up for the one night. But it is said that Gabby and Brian, because of a location tag on his Instagram, which again, I can't check now because his account's been taken down, was camping at the same campground that Kylen and Crystal were staying at. I also heard somebody say that the fact that the Gatorade bottles were like just thrown all over the place kind of sounds like something Brian would do, because when the police had him pulled over and asked him if he wanted a bottle of water, he adamantly said, no, I don't like plastic. I don't drink from plastic bottles. And he's been very open about that on his Instagram as well. So that does sound like somebody who's already stressed out and mad, because the theory that he's already mad that this person called the police on them. So he snapped, and then he did what he did, threw the Gatorade, the plastic bottles around. That's kind of the working theory that's going around. Police have still said that there's absolutely no connection. We do know now Gabby's cause of death, and it's not the same as the girls, but Brian's is. So are they the same ballistics? We know that Gabby and Brian had a gun at one point. There's a picture of Gabby on her Instagram stories of her holding one. So there's so many unanswered questions, and I think the police really need to give us, especially Sean Paul, he's still begging for answers. This was 5 months ago, and he still has absolutely no answers, and he's still on Facebook every day asking anybody for clues, pictures, evidence, anything to try and, like, he has no answers. His daughter and daughter-in-law are just gone. and he has no idea why or who did it. And if it's not Brian, then possibly this person is still out there. I know if it's not Brian, some theories have also been that it's like it was a homophobic person. And I also heard that somebody escaped from a mental hospital that night as well. And he would have fit the description as the creepy guy. Like, Brian didn't really look creepy, but there's just so many coincidences. Something doesn't add up here. My thoughts and prayers go to Sean Paul, and just pray that he gets some sort of closure and can move on soon. But just like social media experts and sleuths have come out for solving the Gabby case, it's never going to be solved, but solving what happened to Gabby, there's got to be somebody that knows something about Kylen and Crystal as well. Like I said, the wedding that has pictures, look through your pictures. If you were in that area that night, like, we have to help this man. Oh, I also saw another theory that kind of makes sense. Again, these are all theories. We will never know for sure. All 4 parties are unfortunately gone. So we'll never know exactly what happened. But when they were pulled over, Brian actually explained to the officers, like, we're hanging out at Moonflower. They have this nice shaded area out back and whatnot. Now, Gabby has posted mentioning their love for the devil's lettuce, and Kylen and Crystal also had paraphernalia and whatnot in their vehicles. So they could have bonded over that. They could have hung out and, you know. There's no way that they didn't meet. That doesn't mean that he did do something. Doesn't mean that he didn't. There's just so many coincidences, and I pray we get some answers for this soon. So moving back to Gabby and Brian. Like I said, the August 12th incident happened, and then we have no sightings, no talks, no nothing, except on August 13th, Brian posted that human mumbo jumbo stuff on his Instagram. And then the next sighting is on the 17th, August 17th. And this is when Brian flew back to Florida. They were in Salt Lake City at the time. He flew back to Florida to move some stuff in a storage unit. Move Gabby's stuff into a storage unit or out of a storage unit to save money. Nobody's gotten this story straight so far. The only thing we know for sure is that he flew back on the 17th till the 23rd. Brian's sister has confirmed this. Brian's lawyer has confirmed this, although I don't trust a word that guy says. But it has been confirmed he flew back to Florida from the 17th to the 23rd. Now, remember when Brian was talking to the police, he said he has no money for a hotel. So how did he pay for a flight back home? And if it was just to, like, close out a storage unit, then, like, to save money, you're spending more money on your flight home. I did see a receipt saying that Brian's dad actually paid for the flight home because he's the one that asked him to come home. But I believe that could also be a cover-up, saying Brian did what he did to Kylen and Crystal and had to get out of there and kind of clear his head, possibly hide some evidence, whatever. Again, my theory. So while Brian was gone back to Florida, Gabby stayed in the Fairfield Inn hotel in Salt Lake City. And this is confirmed by her dad. Joe Petito talked to Gabby while she was there. They actually talked on the 17th, and he was helping her build her website and also ordered her pizza because the Wi-Fi was down in that area, probably because of the wildfires and whatnot. But it was confirmed Gabby stayed at this hotel. Now again, remember when I told you to put a pin in the fact that Gabby was absolutely hysterical when the police wanted to separate them for the night. Remember, she was begging not to be separated, but now all of a sudden she's okay to be separated for 5 days, completely by herself. Yes, I understand she's in a hotel now, a little more secure, but I don't think that was the only thing that was terrifying her from not being, like, separated before. I think maybe she's starting to think, she's starting to process. The female park ranger that was there at the stop on August 12th, it would be really interesting to see her body cam footage too, because she had come out after everything happened saying that she wishes she talked to Gabby a little bit more, that they had some pretty serious conversations when Gabby was in the car. about, like, you know, this is not a healthy relationship. It's kind of toxic. You need to do what's best for you. Now, if you saw the body cam footage, you can see that there's a female park ranger that was there, and she was talking to Gabby a lot while Gabby was in the back of the cruiser. She came out after finding out what had happened to Gabby, saying that she wished she did more. I'll link the article down below, but she's absolutely heartbroken and she wishes she did more. She was talking to Gabby about how their relationship seemed toxic and that Gabby should get out while she can. So maybe Gabby was starting to process everything that park ranger said and agreed that, you know what, maybe this 5 days apart is a good idea. So Brian flew back on the 23rd and the hotel confirmed that they checked out on the 24th. Now on August 5th, Bertolino, the laundry's lawyer, again, don't trust a word he says, but he did confirm the trip, and he said the couple actually paid for the flight because they were contemplating extending their trip and they wanted to save money, so they were removing, like, trying to close out the storage locker. But I swear I saw a receipt saying that Christopher Laundry, Brian's dad, paid for it, and if I can find it again, I will post it in here. So there's a lot of conjecture going on with this trip. I don't think, and everybody online that is talking about this is very, very confused about this August 17th to the 23rd fly home situation. However, when Brian was home, Cassie, Brian's sister, confirmed that she saw him and he didn't mention anything about the August 12th argument. They actually FaceTimed Gabby because Gabby was like Aunt Gabby to Brian's nephews and absolutely loved them, would send them postcards all the time. So they FaceTimed Gabby and she said they both seemed fine. They didn't mention anything about the August 12th incident, didn't mention anything about possibly breaking up or anything like that. And even Gabby's dad said that when he talked to her in the hotel and he was helping her with her website and whatever, she didn't mention it either. Obviously, like, I know as a girl, especially as a daddy's girl, I'm not going to tell him about every little fight we have. I mean, yes, the police got called. It was kind of massive, but it wasn't like full-on DV situation that obviously you are trying to separate yourself from and you need your parents' help. I've been in relationships before where there were red flags, and if we had a fight, I wouldn't tell my parents about it because I knew I was going back to him. I was being an idiot. So I didn't want, and I had feared that my parents would start hating this person if they knew about every fight we had. Same thing with friends and stuff. So I'm assuming that's why Gabby didn't tell Joe exactly what happened. They only found out when the body cam footage was released. But he even said that, like, she seemed fine, she seemed happy, all was good. So on August 19th, their one and unfortunately only video got posted to the Nomadic Static YouTube channel, and it's up to like 7 million views. And here's another thing. When going back and looking through Gabby's Instagram, like, I know she wanted to be a blogger and like this online travel blogger and influencer and stuff, but I don't know how successful she actually was with it yet. Just even the comment of Brian, like, her trying to build, and she even said, I'm trying to build this blog, I'm trying to make this work, because all the comments I see that on her post have all been posted after she was reported missing. Mind you, the previous ones may have been deleted when her account crashed, but it just seems like all the likes, the views, and everything like that, even on the YouTube video, everything came after her disappearance. Now, this video had clips from their previous California road trip, as well as some from this one. Not anything special. They did show the van, so you know that it's not just the previous ones. But they were sitting, there was one clip that they were sitting in a tent talking about how they love Utah and it's one of their favorites and everything. And that clip happened after the August 12th incident. So that is just proof that everything you see online, you need to read between the lines, because it's never, ever exactly what you're being shown. Also on August 19th, Gabby posted an Instagram picture that is kind of weird now that we know exactly, like, so it's a picture just of her legs pointing out the back of the van, and you can see Brian's head in the back. So the caption reads, almost immediately after telling Brian how happy it made me to see that people were truly respectful of the park, I watched some guy leave his processed, pre-packaged plastic conglomerate of lunch garbage on the picnic table with a sad face, and then hashtag respect national parks, hashtag NPS, hashtag parks project, hashtag live sustainably, hashtag van life, and hashtag live plastic free. And then there is also no location tag. So the reason this is weird to a lot of people is A, this has already been a picture that she posted back on August 2nd in an Instagram story. So nobody knows what they're trying to do here, because Brian wasn't even with her on August 19th. He was still in Florida till the 23rd. And not just that, but the caption really sounds like something like the way he writes his posts. So the online consensus is that he actually has access to her account. Maybe they shared an account or whatever. He has access to her account, and he posted this probably to make it seem like nothing's going on, everything's all happy-go-lucky, and to show that he didn't fly home. Who knows? So they check out of the hotel on the 24th in Utah, and then on the 25th, they were heading to Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. And this is the last time that Gabby's mother, Nicole, actually talked to her on the phone. This would actually be the last time anybody actually talked to her. So she was telling Nicole about how they were heading to Grand Tetons, and that she wasn't sure where the relationship was heading. I personally believe, again, my theory, is that after that 5-day break, she realized, you know what, I can do this on my own. I'm so much happier. She started putting all the red flags together. I think August 12th was really the beginning to the end, which she thought was going to, like, it seems like she was really contemplating whether or not to stay together with him. This would also be Gabby's last Instagram post. And again, people are speculating that it's very weird because there's no hashtags, there's no location tags. It's the shortest caption ever, just saying Happy Halloween with some emojis. And it's a picture of her holding a pumpkin, which, remember, their trip was supposed to end on Halloween, but holding a pumpkin in front of this butterfly mural, which is actually in Colorado. So it's a picture that was just in her drafts or whatever. So people are just saying like that it was really, really weird. And the online sleuths actually noticed that her hair is much shorter and like looks like it was recently done. So this was very possibly even a picture from like previous years. I don't know if that necessarily matters. It's just that it was a weird picture and caption to post, considering it was only August 25th. So on August 26th or 25th, I've seen both, and I don't even know if this is actually, like, this isn't something that gets brought up multiple times in any other case stories. So I don't know if it's been 100% confirmed, but the shop owner at Rustic Row in Victor, Idaho, says that the couple came in and they looked around the shop for about 20 minutes, never ended up buying anything, but that they seemed happy, was telling the shop owner that they just stayed at the Grand Tetons and that they were heading to Yellowstone. But they were also telling the couple, or the shop owner, that they were engaged and they were so excited to get married. And as we know, they broke off the engagement, so I don't know. Now here's the thing, Grand Teton National Park is about 30 miles from Yellowstone. The shop was only 1 mile from Yellowstone. And we know that the couple never made it to Yellowstone. So I don't know why they would go back to Grand Tetons, and we know they do for the following things that happen. So I don't know if this has actually been, like if this is for sure that the couple was at the shop, but I wanted to make a note of it because it was something that was given as detail. So also on August 26th, around 8 o'clock at night, Jessica Schultz saw only Brian parking the van back at the Spread Creek dispersed camping area in Grand Teton. Now Gabby could have very well been in the back. And then at midnight on that same night, Hunter Mans actually came out saying that he spotted Brian at the Bullwinkle's bar in Montana. Now remember, Gabby said none of them drink, but this guy that Hunter saw was drinking, and he got very aggressive, jumped into Hunter's conversation and basically just like belittling them, actually creeped out the female that Hunter was with. I'll actually leave Hunter's interview link down below as well. He says they left about 11:30 midnight and Brian, or this guy, was still there. And then we know that the van was back at the campsite on the 27th for sure. And Jessica is saying that the van was there until the 29th. On August 27th, at about 1 p.m., the couple was spotted at the Mary Piglet's restaurant in Jackson, Wyoming. Nina Angelo came out on Instagram stories and told the story. Keep in mind, guys, I'm telling you this as a timeline, how things happened, not how things came out, because it would be a lot of back and forth, and that's what all the other videos are about. I'm trying to do just a thorough timeline of how things happened. So Nina Angelo would come out on Instagram stories saying, hey, we saw this couple and they were fighting. At about 1:30, they abruptly left the restaurant, and Gabby would be left outside crying while Brian came back into the restaurant 4 different times to yell at the waitress. Nobody knows what they were fighting about, just that he was very angry. Gabby ended up coming back in and apologizing to the waitstaff and the managers. Now, Mary Piglets has recently come out saying that this did not happen at all, but I think they forget that they posted at first confirming that this happened. They may have taken it down now, but of course the internet sleuths have their evidence. So the Mary Piglets is about a 45-minute drive from the Spread Creek dispersed campsite where the couple was staying. And at about 6:30 that night, we know that the van was back at the campsite. We know this because the YouTube channel Red, White, and Bethune actually went through their video footage. And this is what I mean about like social media and the internet really helping solve this case where the police dropped the ball. Once this case started getting traction and the parents were asking everybody, like, if you were in that area, please let us know what's going on. Let us know if you saw anything. This family channel that does vlogging and travel vlogs remembers being in that area on that day. So they went back through their dash cam footage from their RV, and sure enough, they spot the van. And I believe, and I think the parents and a lot of people believe, this was the key to ultimately finding Gabby's body. Gabby's body would eventually be found right in that area. Now, tons of people have dissected this video, zoomed in, fixed the pixelation, brightened it up, and you can see, we think you can see the back door to the van closing and someone getting in it. And you can also notice that like the shocks on the van are lower than when the van was sighted in the police cam footage. So someone was definitely in the back of the van. People also noticed that you could like see someone digging in the background, and that there was sandals and a water pistol on the ground. None of that matters anymore because we know none of that has anything to do with it. But that's what I mean about people coming out with theories and evidence and proof. It got crazy. However, we do believe that this is the dreadful day that Gabby lost her life, since the Mary Piglets incident would be the last time Gabby was ever seen alive. Now, I also read that one of Gabby's friends received a Snapchat message from Gabby, or Gabby's phone, saying that they were heading to Yellowstone because Gabby was supposed to meet up with her friend in Yellowstone for her birthday. But this is another one of those things where it was said in passing and never really brought up again, so I don't know how true it is. Now, nothing on the 28th, and on the 29th, Miranda Baker would actually pick up a hitchhiker. Now, guys, don't do this. I know we all want to see the best in people, but the world is so scary nowadays. You never know what kind of situations you could get yourself into. Luckily, Miranda's boyfriend was with her, but still, there's people that take out couples. Like, just be very careful. Now, this hitchhiker that Miranda picked up about 5:30 just happened to be Brian. So Miranda picked him up at Coulter Bay in Wyoming, and Brian offered her $200 to drive him to Jackson. They got in the car, They were just talking. He was telling her about how he had been camping for the last couple days out in the wilderness, but he only had a tarp to sleep on and an empty backpack, and that his fiance was back at the campsite working on her blog. She said he had some like scruff, but he was not dirty. He didn't stink. He was not in any shape that someone who had just been camping out in the wilderness with nothing but a tarp would look like after 3 days. However, keep in mind where she picked him up from in Coulter Bay. It was kind of like a trucker rest stop thing. So there's showers, payphones, ATM, basically anything he needed. Maybe he needed to clean himself up. Maybe he needed to make some phone calls and let his parents know what just happened and make arrangements to come home. Maybe he had to hide some evidence. This was all the theories that were going around at the time that this came out. Because again, we're never going to know, unfortunately. Or maybe he was just trying to create an alibi. Now, Coulter Bay is 29 miles from the campsite that they were staying at. And walking, it would take about 8 hours and 40 minutes. He technically had 2 days because he was last seen on the 27th. And then this is now the 29th. So they were driving along. Miranda said it was really weird because he was never talking to her. She would ask him questions, but he would only answer her boyfriend basically and like talk through her. So she ends up mentioning that they're going to Jackson Hole, and he like freaked out and was like, no, drop me off right now. I can't go there. I'll hitchhike the rest of the way. Now, if you look on the map, obviously I'll pull it up here. Jackson is north and Jackson Hole is south. And he needed to get back to Jackson because that's where the van is, that's where the campsite is, that's where his fiance is working on her blog. So Miranda and her boyfriend dropped him off at about 6:09 at Jackson Hole Dam. And then about 6:15 to 6:20, Norma Jean Jalovic, I hope I pronounced that right, picked up Brian at the dam and drives him back to the campsite, but only to the front gate. She offered to drive him right to the campsite, and he absolutely freaked out, said, no, just drop me off at the front gate. I'll walk back up. Now, Norma Jean said he seemed like a very nice gentleman. They were talking about how he had been hiking for a couple days while his fiance was back at the campsite working on the blog. Same story that he told Miranda, again, creating an alibi so that he could maybe, if it came out, be like, I don't know what happened to her. I was gone. I was hiking. I have these witnesses. So anyways, Norma Jean dropped him off at the front gate at Spread Creek Dispersed Camping Area. And then that's the last anybody saw of him for a while. Now, Gabby's friend was awaiting. She was supposed to, Gabby was supposed to text her friend to finalize birthday plans that they were going to have in Yellowstone. And Gabby's friend said that this was very odd. She never received a text. And it's very odd because usually even when they're in an area with no service, the minute they get service again, Gabby would call or text whoever just to let them know that nothing was wrong. On August 30th, Nicole would get a text from Gabby that she said was very odd. She knew the minute she got it, it was very odd. And it said, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting voicemails and missed calls." Stan was the name of Gabby's grandfather, and Gabby would have never called him Stan. She would have called him Grandpa. So Nicole, and it also said no service in Yosemite. Now Nicole said not only does Gabby not call her grandpa Stan, but she knew the plan wasn't to go to Yosemite. She knew last she talked to her on the 25th, they were making their way to Yellowstone. Now, the Yellowstone's in Wyoming, which they already were. Yosemite is in California. So she knows that there is no way that Gabby meant to say Yosemite. Could have been autocorrect. I mean, we've all been there. But the Stan message really made her feel like it was weird. So anyways, Nicole ends up telling her father, their grandpa, just, hey, you're trying to get a hold of Gabby. She has no service. She'll get a hold of you when she can. So there's no other posts, sightings, anything until September 1st at 10:26 when the license plate on the van got clocked entering Northport, Florida. Ryan drove the van to his parents' house and Gabby was nowhere to be found. So the last time Brian spotted is about 6:30 on the 29th, and then 10:26 in the morning on September 31st, Brian is spotted coming home with the van without Gabby. So he has 50 plus hours to drive from Florida to Wyoming. This is only a 36-hour drive, nonstop. Obviously, he stopped and whatnot. So he had over 50 hours to do so. Obviously, we don't know exactly when he left the campsite in Wyoming, but he had over 50 hours to do this drive. Now, on this drive, on August 31st, he actually created a Spotify playlist called Self-Consumption. On this playlist, there was another playlist too called Mountaintops, but there was a couple songs by Matt Berry, one of them called Woman, and the lyrics go, "Your woman is your angel, is your left side, is your whole life, and easily the most beautiful thing in the world. She'll soothe you, she'll accuse you, she'll confuse you, she'll lose you, but always be the best friend you have in the world. Time and space, things in their place. I know it's more than a feeling, 'cause my love, it has no ceiling for you. She's dangerous, she's courageous, contagious, she's ageless, and could be the last thing you see on this earth. 'Cause your woman is your angel, is your left side, keeps your tongue tied, and easily the most beautiful thing in the world." Also on this playlist, there were 2 other songs by the same British singer called Take My Hand, about picking up a stranger at a bar, and The Badger's Wake, about the animal decomposing, which I'm sure are fantastic, great songs. But when you read the lyrics, in hindsight, it's kind of creepy that he added these songs while driving home after he did what he just did. Obviously, I told you he was unmedicated for some mental health issues, and I had mentioned the weird, creepy stories he was reading and obsessed with. The one is actually about a travel person, someone that likes to travel. He's on a trek. I don't know what the word I'm thinking of. And he ultimately becomes a serial person. Again, not to say that if you are interested in these kinds of stories that anything's wrong with you, but now that we know what happened and we know that he's unmedicated and just all these different things are now coming into play, and it's definitely like seeming like something was seriously wrong. Now, Brian also spent or withdrew $1,000 in goods off of Gabby's credit cards, probably for gas, food, on the trip, whatever the case is. But put a pin in this. So Brian drives home to Florida, parks the van in the garage. Now, all the footage you can see from the house, all the vehicles are normally parked in the driveway. But for some reason, he parked the van in the garage this day. And then Brian and his parents hopped in the Mustang and drove over to Brian's sister's house, Brian's sister Cassie's house, to visit. Cassie would later say that she didn't even know the van was back at the time. She didn't know Gabby didn't come back with him. It was just a visit. He had just gotten home. He wanted to see his nephews, which normally would be fine and understandable. But he knows what he just did. Does his parents know? It really starts to become clear that the parents did know, and they helped him out here. But I understand it's innocent until proven guilty. But I cannot believe that he just went on living his life like nothing happened. Even if his parents don't know, do they not question why he has Gabby's van where she is? Remember, she was living with them. It's not like he can say, hey, I dropped her off at home. No, she was living with his parents. And this becomes one of the sickest parts of the whole situation. Gabby was living with the Laundries for at least a year. This was another set of parents to her. This was another daughter. This was going to be your daughter-in-law. You would think that you cared for them a lot more than what's going to come out. I know I said I'm going to keep my opinion out of it, but this pisses me off. On September 4th, Brian opens a new account at AT&T to get a new phone. Remember this. Where's his old phone, though? We know he had one. He pulled it out in the footage when on that August 12th incident. So where's his old phone? And Stephen Bertolino, the Laundrie's lawyer, was asked if he knew where Brian's old phone was, he just straight up said no, not no comment or anything like that, just no. So he more or less acknowledged that there was another phone. Why is he opening up a new account? Around this time, neighbors say that they also see the Laundries packing up this new camper. Don't know if it matters that it's new, but I know there was speculation of like, where's the old one? Maybe Brian's hiding out in that old one, which possibly could still be happening. Either way, this is a very, very small camper for 3 grown adults. So on September 6th, the family ends up going camping at Fort DeSoto campsite in Florida. They went from the 6th to the 8th. That was Labor Day weekend. Even though Bertolino would come out later saying that they left on the 7th, they only stayed the 1 day. But like I said, he's a liar. He has contradicted himself so many times. He's been caught in lies so many times. So I don't believe a word he says. Because he also said Brian wasn't even there. But we have confirmation that he was there. Roberta actually had to sign her, Christopher, the dad, and Brian in when they checked into the campsite. Now also, interesting fact, they actually changed the reservation from 2 people to 3 people. And she changed this reservation on August 31st. So on August 31st, before Brian even got home, she knew he was coming home alone. So there's been a lot of back and forth with this camping trip since the news broke. But basically, like whether or not there was 2 different camping trips, basically Chris and Roberta had camping reservations for September 1st to the 3rd and then the 6th to the 8th. When they called on August 31st, they canceled their 1st to the 3rd reservation and changed the 6th to the 8th reservation from 3 campers to 2. Now, another way we can confirm that Brian was actually there is because Cassie, his sister, would come out saying that she and her kids and her husband actually went and met up with the family at the campsite on the 6th, the holiday. Brian was definitely there. There's pictures to prove it. Now, when asked why Cassie never questioned why Gabby wasn't there or what had happened, she said she thought maybe they had broken up and she just didn't want to bring it up. She thought Brian would talk about it when he was ready to, kind of thing, which I understand. I can get that. But it's just crazy that nobody asked where Brian is or where Gabby was. And still Cassie didn't know the van was at the house. Now, we also know for sure that Brian was at this campsite because later on another group of campers would come out with a selfie they had taken and Brian's walking in the background. Obviously not confirmed that it's him, but it looks exactly like him, as you can see. Now, not a big deal. At the time of this camping weekend, nobody even knew that Gabby was missing. Nobody knew anything. So obviously this couple, or these 2 couples, just took a selfie, noticed that there was someone walking in the background, didn't think anything of it until the story came out and questions started being asked, and then they re-looked at it and was like, hey, oh my goodness, he was definitely here. Now, here is my biggest question. How do you go camping with your family acting like nothing's wrong when your fiance is missing? Obviously, Brian knows what he did and what happened, but his parents, supposedly, have no idea where she is. Like, what story are they following at this time? And if they did know what he did, how are you guys going camping like nothing happened? This blows my mind. So after days of no communication, Nicole, Gabby's mom, starts reaching out to the Laundries, asking if they have heard from the kids. At this time, Nicole was actually worried about both Brian and Gabby because she hasn't heard from Gabby since the 25th. And that's not like Gabby. Even if they were in a place with no service, the minute they got to service, Gabby would reach out to them. They talked almost every day. So it had been quite a while without any communication. Nicole reached out to Brian's parents saying like, hey, have you heard from the kids? She was worried that maybe there was an accident somewhere, that both the kids were in trouble. And nothing, no answer. Calls were going to voicemail, voicemails weren't being returned, text messages weren't being returned. Joe, Gabby's dad, would start reaching out to the Laundries again. no response. And that was really weird. That had never happened before. So on September 11th, Nicole ended up calling the police to report missing persons. The police in Northport, Florida went to the Laundrie's house to try and get information, seeing if Chris and Roberta had heard from the kids or anything like that. As soon as the police knocked on the door, they were handed papers to the lawyer and nobody was speaking. How did they already have papers drawn up from the lawyer? How did they know they were going to need a lawyer? The police would then contact Nicole to let them know that Gabby's van was actually back in Florida and Gabby was not. And this is when Nicole would say she knew her daughter was no longer on this earth. The police end up taking Gabby's van into custody that night to process it, search, whatever. In my opinion, they're not going to find anything. It's already been cleaned out. Now, they would say that they ended up taking some things, but they never elaborated exactly what. However, we do know that they have Gabby's hard drive, although I'm sure that's not going to show much. We all know videos show all the pretty stuff, right? Now, people have pointed out that in these pictures of the van being in police custody, there's actually new stickers on the back of the van, which don't really mean anything, but it does show what kind of person Brian was, because these stickers were placed after the 27th. So after Gabby had already lost her life, Brian's adding stickers to the van while driving home. Like, it's so weird. So from September 11th to the 17th, it's to be said that Brian is seen mowing the lawn, going on bike rides and walks with the mom, basically acting like nothing is wrong. Why is he not out looking for his fiance? If he doesn't know what's wrong, whatever his story is, she went off on a ride, went off with somebody else, whatever. I don't really know what his story could even be at this point that anybody would believe, but how is he acting like nothing is going on? Like, his fiance is not missing. This is when the story got out and everything started spiraling. The fact that they lawyered up immediately and weren't talking to anybody is where everybody started like, yeah, you're guilty. That is showing guilt. I understand, like, that's their right. It's their right not to say anything. And a lot of people will say not to say anything because then you're incriminating yourself. But remember, Gabby lived with the Laundries. If Brian's parents didn't know what Brian had done, how are they not answering the Petito family and showing their support and trying to help this missing person? Like, this was your future daughter-in-law. You loved her like a daughter, and she is missing, and you're doing nothing. You're not talking to the police. I understand. Okay, I'm a mom. I understand protecting your babies. But I don't know. I want to say, like, if my son went on a road trip with his fiance and came back without her and told me what happened, like, I'm taking him to the police station. You can still love and support your kids, but they need to, like, actions have consequences. I just don't understand. I don't understand their mindset. Like, you don't want to act, or you don't want to seem guilty, like, at least pretend. Okay, clearly you know what you did, but you could at least pretend that you don't. The minute you lawyer up and stop talking, the minute you're showing your guilt. Like, you look at, like, Chris Watts and other situations like that. Like, at least they pretended. Gabby's parents were on every news outlet, everything they could think of, asking for help, asking for the community and online people. Again, if you were in that area, if you have any footage, if you saw anything, to please come forward. And that's where all the social media posts and everything started spiraling. Jim, Gabby's stepdad, even flew out to Wyoming from New York to help in the search for Gabby's body, because that YouTube video was put out and you saw the van, the one from Red, White, and Bethune. They knew that, like, this was the area that Gabby was last seen. So thankfully that video got put out and they had a general idea where to start, because if not, they have from Wyoming to Florida to search for this poor girl. The family even wrote a letter to the Laundries begging them to help. If they had any information, please just give us something. Tell us where to begin looking. and nothing. Absolute crickets. On September 14th, Gabby's van was processed by the FBI and Brian was named a person of interest. Because he was only named a person of interest and not an actual suspect, there wasn't enough proof for him to be a suspect, apparently. Because he was only named a person of interest, cops really couldn't do anything. He was able to live his life and whatnot. Now, I know I saw a video of a lawyer explaining the reason they didn't want to bring him in and like name him as a suspect right away is because you really like there's a small time frame, a small window where you label someone a suspect and interrogate them to where you have to charge them. And if you don't, the person will go free forever. So they needed to like hone down and get as much they didn't want to blow it basically. So they had to just keep their eye on him and just go with that until they had enough proof. But someone messed up. I did hear that on September 14th, there has been other claims of Brian buying another phone, but this has never actually been confirmed, and later details will prove that this doesn't add up. So if you've heard that, I don't think it's true. On September 16th, the first police body cam footage was released that we all saw, and this is when everybody realized like something serious was going on. This is also when Kylen and Crystal started coming into talks. And on this day, the police chief did a press conference and somebody would ask them if they knew where Brian was. And he said they knew exactly where he is. They wouldn't say where, but they said that they know where he is. But wait. On Friday, September 17th, the Laundries would contact the authorities, but not to help. They contacted the authorities to report Brian missing. They would say that they haven't seen Brian since he left to go on a hike at the Carlton Reserve on September 14th, Tuesday, September 14th. Why are you reporting it now on the 17th? Why would you not report it that night? Like, hey, he didn't come home. I mean, I also get that he was one to go out and live off the land for a couple days. It was said that he actually spent 3 months on the Appalachian Trail one time. So, okay, I get it. He didn't come home the one night. Cool. Although he didn't leave with any equipment, so what's he sleeping in? Now, apparently, your son has been missing for 3 days at this time. What are you doing about it? They're not out looking for him. They don't look worried at all. And I thought the police said yesterday that they knew exactly where Brian was. But Brian's been gone since the 14th. But on the 16th, the police knew exactly where he was. So the FBI agents, or the police department, that were watching the house, confused Roberta for Brian. And that's why they said they knew exactly where he was. So when Roberta actually went and picked up the Mustang on Wednesday and returned it to the house, and then the police chief did their conference on Thursday saying, yeah, we know where it is. They thought Brian had driven the Mustang back because they were like, why would they not leave the Mustang with Brian? Obviously, he's at home. And because she had a baseball cap on, apparently that's why they got confused, I guess. Also, the fact that he can go on a hike while his fiance is missing. So Brian drove his silver Mustang up to the Carlton Reserve on the 14th to go on this hike. September 17th, that he was reported missing, is also the day that protesters showed up at the Laundrie's house. Now, you know what? Don't do this, guys. It doesn't help at all. It really just annoys the neighbors. There was actually a situation where the neighbors got into an altercation with some of the protesters. Like, they were being extremely invasive. And I get it. You want the Laundries to talk. Everybody wanted the Laundries to talk. But they were out there for like weeks and nothing changed. Like, protesting like that doesn't help. Once the protesters started showing up, they started putting up signs and flowers and basically a little memorial for Gabby on the Laundrie's front yard. Just some were really, really nice, some not so nice. Basically just trying to entice the Laundries to do anything and come out and say something. And then Northport police finally actually moved all the items from the Laundrie's yard and moved it down to City Hall, and it all stayed there for a couple weeks. Gabby's family actually came and visited it and took some items back to their respective homes. Also on the 17th, police entered the Laundrie's house and removed some articles of clothing, they say to help the canines in the search for Brian. They also searched the Mustang at the house, and also someone would come out on Instagram with a picture. It's blurry, so you can't tell for sure, but they say that they saw Brian fleeing the backside of the house on the 17th, like once the protesters started showing up. I know here in Canada, like all houses are really close together and there's like fences around and stuff. And even like your backyard, there's another house. But the Laundrie's house and area, it's wide open. So it is very possible that he could have escaped through the back and nobody would have even seen because all the protesters were at the front. But he was supposedly gone since the 14th. On September 18th, the FBI begins the search at Carlton Reserve. Now, if he was on the run, he's had at least 4 days at this point to get wherever he's going, especially if he really went to the Carlton Reserve. There was a lot of speculation at this time that he wasn't even there. He was somewhere else. He was on the run. He was gone to Cuba, like nobody knows. And let me tell you, police definitely, it was more than just a missing persons, because the resources that they brought out for this search, these big old vehicles and machines, they don't usually do that for any missing persons. On September 19th, body remains were found in Wyoming, Bridger Teton National Park on the edge of Grand Teton National Park, matching Gabby's description. Now, the location of the body was actually only a 5-minute walk from where the van was spotted in that red, white, and Bethune video. It was a very remote area. You had to know that you wanted to go there, basically. So Jim, Gabby's stepdad, on the Dr. Phil interview, remember, he went out to Wyoming to join the search, so he was there. He actually got the call when he was at his hotel room, and he went out to see, and he could match up the sweater that she was wearing. He knew that that was her sweater. But he said you could tell that there was definitely a campsite there. You could see where the fire ring was. You could see where like the tent was set up. But he explained that it wasn't, so it's a dispersed camping area. It's not like campsites marked off. It's kind of, you just throw up a tent wherever you want. And you had to cross a little creek and over some rocks and walk out a bit to get to this open area that her body was ultimately found. Jim would actually place rocks in the shape of a cross. He said in an interview that he put flowers where her head was laying. The investigators kind of told him the direction her head was laying, so he put a memorial cross up in place of her. Now, on this day, allegedly, FBI obtained tracking data for Gabby's phone as well. We haven't heard anything about it. They didn't have the phone. Nobody knows where the phone is, and nothing's come out about that since. On September 20th, FBI removed the Laundries from the house and performed a search warrant at the house. They spent hours inside the house and removed a ton of evidence boxes. The FBI also towed the Mustang away to do a more thorough search, and they went and searched at Cassie's house, Brian's sister. The Laundrie's lawyer, Bertolino, would come out with a statement, another lie, saying that the Mustang was left at the reserve on Tuesday when Brian went there. Supposedly, Brian's parents went up to the reserve on Wednesday to look for Brian and noticed that there was a note on the car saying that it had to be removed. It was parked in an area it wasn't supposed to be parked at, and that it was going to be towed away if not. But that the Laundrie decided to leave the car there for Brian to bring it back home, and he said that they went back on Thursday to pick it up. However, there's actually evidence that the Mustang was back at the house on Wednesday, and later details will explain this. On September 21st, the body was confirmed to be Gabby's, and the cause of death was labeled as a homicide. FBI concluded the search at the scene and kind of like just ended the case there at that point, like in that area. On September 22nd, an arrest warrant was issued for Brian Laundrie, but not for what we wish it was for. The arrest warrant was actually for fraud, basically. So for him using Gabby's cards, like I discussed earlier. Now, it was never confirmed by authorities that they were Gabby's cards. They just said for using someone else's cards, but Gabby's dad actually slipped up on Dr. Phil and said like he used her cards. At the time, Bertolino would put out a statement saying Brian Laundrie is currently charged with the unauthorized use of a debit card belonging to Gabby. Remember, he is only considered a person of interest in relation to Gabby Petito's demise. Before that, though, he actually put out this statement that says, "It is my understanding that the arrest warrant for Brian Laundrie is related to activities occurring after the death of Gabby Petito and not related to her actual demise." Keep in mind, at this point, her body wasn't found, so nobody knew the time of death. So how did Bertolino know that Brian used her cards after her death? I understand it could just be an assumption, but he kind of stuck his foot in his mouth here. Also on the 22nd, the Laundries would pack up their vehicle and drive to Orlando. And they were walking around, this is really weird. They were walking around the library for about an hour and a half. They never looked at one book or display. They just walked around. And then they realized they were being followed by undercover detectives. And they got on the phone real quick and left the library, went to a business building and had a meeting with their lawyer who had flown in from New York, apparently. They had that meeting for about an hour and then drove back home. Now, here's the weird part. Why were they at the library? They didn't look at any books. They didn't look at any displays. They just walked around for an hour and a half, realized they were being followed, jumped on the phone, and left. Why were they even at this library? Also, why did Bertolino fly all the way from New York to Orlando just for an hour-long meeting? Every other time they've talked to them on the phone or faxed things over. Like, why couldn't he have done the same thing then? Just really weird that on the day his arrest warrant was put out, all this went down. Speculation at the time was that they knew where Brian was. They were trying to meet up with him, maybe to give him some like food and whatever. And once they realized they were being followed, they said forget it and left. Because I don't know, guys. Why were they at the library? On September 23rd, the FBI returned the Mustang and a $20,000 reward was put out for Brian's whereabouts. Now here's like the funnest part of the case, if there can be any light side to it. On September 25th, Dog the Bounty Hunter actually joined in the search. Now he did it, obviously he wasn't hired, he did it out of his own free will because he had a daughter around Gabby's age that lost her life as well. So this really meant a lot to him. He actually went to the Laundrie's house and knocked on the door, and Roberta called 911. If your son's missing, why would you not want all the help you could get? Why are you calling the police on this guy who's just trying to help you? Like, you're not making sense. Make it make sense. You should want all the help you can get. Gabby's family was on every news press outlet, on Facebook, out joining the search, on Dr. Phil. Like, they were out there begging people to help. Brian's gone missing and his parents are sitting at home planting new flowers in the garden bed, which don't even get me started on that story. So this is where everybody started realizing, like, they know where he is. He ain't missing. On September 27th, Dog would come out saying that he got a lead from the Fort DeSoto campsite. And this is where we found out that they went camping. I don't think we would have ever known about this camping trip if Dog didn't join in the search. Now, does it really play any part in the case? Not really. A little bit in my original theory, like, people started thinking that he's not even at the Carlton Reserve. That's just a cover-up to get the police kind of off the trail. There's a lot of like boats and stuff leaving from Fort DeSoto and easily go to Cuba and all that stuff. So I can't believe how many stories and theories came out about this. I guess the only thing that really matters about it, like, it does come into play for the fact that we caught Bertolino in a couple lies, and how weird it is that they went on a family camping trip when their daughter-in-law and fiance are missing. So Dog is searching around the islands. He brought his whole crew, and he's searching around the islands at Fort DeSoto. Well, the FBI and all the other big artillery, is that the word? Auxiliary? The big guys were out searching the Carlton Reserve. It is thanks to him that we find out that Roberta changed the reservation from 2 to 3. So clearly they knew on the 31st that Brian was coming home without Gabby. After the statements of Fort DeSoto and the possibilities of exiting on a boat, someone put out a claim, this one fake YouTube channel, I'm not even going to give him the clout and give him the name, but he put out this clip showing that Brian had gone live on his Instagram for about 3 seconds, and it showed that he was on a boat. Now, this has been absolutely debunked and proven that it is fake, but there are so many theories and things like this that came out, so just be careful what you read. Yes, it's another day, another outfit. Sorry, I have some medical stuff going on, but that's a whole nother story. I promise we're almost done, so let's get back into this. On September 30th, the FBI returned to the Laundrie's house and actually searched the camper this time. They only went in real quick, and they went in with an evidence cup. Again, they said it was for more DNA or for the canine dogs to get a scent or whatever, but that's a DNA cup. So I don't understand how that can help the canines, but they were like quickly in and out. Like they were clearly looking for something. This is also the day that the second body cam footage from the Moab stop got released, and the uproar really started because then you saw kind of another perspective of the officer that actually got the call that I talked about, like that actually got the domestic phone call and the witness statement and stuff. So yeah. Now, October 2nd, protesters actually started showing up at Cassie's house. This was a mess. So she actually did an interview with GMA, and the footage got so chopped up, and Bertolino actually came out. Again, we all know what we think about him, but he came out, and the statement basically called her a liar, saying that Brian wasn't at the campsite and all this stuff. And her interview that got so chopped up, like it made it seem like she did know, but she wasn't telling anybody and stuff. And the actual footage did get released later, showing that like this had been kind of edited that way. But it was a roller coaster at first. So protesters showed up to Cassie's house on the 2nd, and then on the 4th, the protesters actually worked. Her and her husband came out and talked to the protesters, basically saying like, you're scaring my children. Actually, she kind of contradicted herself, because at first she said, we're only coming out to talk to you because you're scaring my children and this isn't fair. But then her husband kind of slipped up and was like, we can't even hear you inside. This is a waste of time. So either way, whether or not she was lying, she's been told by the police and the FBI and the lawyers not to talk. She could be incriminating herself, incriminating whatever. She's been told not to talk. So even if she does know something, she can't say. Which I get, it sucks, especially for like the Petito family and the public that are just looking for answers. But I honestly don't believe that she knew anything. She kind of seems, and this is just my opinion, this is no shade at anybody, but it kind of seems like she's almost the black sheep of the family, and kind of, it's like Chris and Roberta and Brian, and then Cassie and her family. Like, they have their secrets, and they probably didn't tell her, knowing how quickly she flip-flopped with the protesters and stuff. They probably just didn't even tell her everything. Again, that's my opinion. She very well could have known everything, but again, she was told not to talk. What we did get from this interview with the protesters is that she did confirm that Brian came back on the 17th to the 23rd for that storage unit story, and that she had FaceTimed with Gabby, like the nephews FaceTimed with Gabby, and that Nobody said anything about the August 12th incident. Nobody said anything about issues with the relationship. Everybody seemed fine. She also went back to do another interview with GMA. Apparently, she didn't learn her lesson before, but this one actually did look like it was more professional, like in an office kind of thing, and it did paint her in a better light. Ready for a kicker? On October 5th, Bertolino came out and said that the parents, the laundry parents, actually messed up their dates, and that Brian actually went hiking on Monday the 13th, not actually Tuesday the 14th. Keep in mind, they reported him on Friday the 17th. So how, it's not like it was 2 months different. How do you mess up, like it's the same week. It's the same, huh? But now the Mustang being back a day earlier makes sense, right? Bertolino also came out saying that when Brian went on this hike, he left his wallet and his phone behind. Remember that brand new phone he just got on September 4th? And then he left it behind when he went hiking on September 13th? Okay, this is also the day that the first part of the Dr. Phil interview with Gabby's parents was released. And they were basically urging Brian to come forward, tell everybody what you know, what happened. Obviously, we know she's gone and stuff. Like, you can't really give us any information there to help and find her, but you've already done so much damage. Like, just turn yourself in, pay the price, be a man about it, and that kind of stuff. And the lawyer for the Petitos actually kind of said some things insinuating that the laundry parents very well could be in trouble for any of their involvement with this as well. They were basically trying to like put the pressure on him. Did it work? Who knows? On October 6th, back neighbor to the laundries, this is when they released the information about seeing him flee on foot on the 17th. I showed you the picture. It does look like him, but if you've been following this case, you know that there are thousands of people in this world that look like Brian Laundrie. Any white bald man looks like Brian Laundrie because everybody was citing him when he was missing. Everybody. He was cited in Mexico, in Canada, on a plane, in California, and everywhere. He was everywhere. Now, over the last week or so, the search kind of died down at Carlton Reserve. There would only be about like 2-3 vehicles there on any given day. The police even said like they kind of exhausted all their efforts there. But on this date, October 6th, there was actually like 15 to 20 cars there. They had drones. Like, they were definitely searching for something. Bertolino came out with a statement saying Christopher wants to help the FBI search the Carlton Reserve, but only the Carlton Reserve. He won't help them search anywhere else, only the Carlton Reserve, because he knows that's where he is. Sounds very, very fishy to me. Did they watch the Dr. Phil interview? Dog the Bounty Hunter is still checking the remote camping locations at Fort DeSoto at this time. And then on October 7th, Christopher actually went out with the FBI and helped search the Carlton Reserve, but only for like a really short time. It wasn't that long at all. And of course, they found nothing. There's like the way he was communicating and joking around and laughing with the FBI agents, like, it's not the way somebody looks when A, they're innocent, and B, they're out searching for their missing child. Like, it just looked like he was having a rendezvous with a best friend. It's just, they were so weird during this whole time. And I think that's the craziest part of this case is there's so many unanswered questions. There's so many things that keep linking together but don't make sense, and contradictions, and it's just, this case is just so crazy, and I think that's why so many people have become so invested in it. On October 11th, Grand Teton coroner confirms that the cause of death of Gabby was manual strangulation. So this coroner's report would be the first time that DV was actually mentioned, although we all kind of figured it out after the August 12th incident. The coroner even mentions that all cases should get the same attention that Gabby's case has gotten, whether or not they're a blogger or high profile or anything like that. especially the lives of the indigenous, black, and brown communities. He would go on to say that officials conducted a full workup, a whole body CT scan, a forensic pathology exam, a forensic anthropology exam, and a toxicology evaluation. He wasn't able to comment on the results, and he also said he could not comment on how he came to his conclusions on cause of death or who may have done it. DNA samples were taken from the body, and it would help law enforcement determine whether whoever strangled Gabby intended to end her life. I don't know what other reason you would have for that, but that's what he said. And then he also confirmed Gabby was not pregnant. Keep in mind, this takes about 7 minutes to complete. So he had, or whoever, had 7 minutes to figure out you're doing the wrong thing, to have any remorse, to stop what you're doing. 7 minutes. That's a very long time when you're doing something like that. It's described as a very passionate crime of passion, and it's the most intimate type of homicide. He also confirmed that the time of death was about 3 to 4 weeks before her body was found, which does line up with that August 27th date. October 15th, Gabby's parents took her ashes out to Jenny Lake, which is actually the area that her body was found. And Joe posted a beautiful caption saying, now she can enjoy this view for the rest of her life, the rest of her eternity, like forever. She loved to be in outdoors, and now she can do that forever. Kind of memorializing the area instead of having bad connotations with it. Now on October 20th, after 5 weeks of extensive searching at the Carlton Reserve, the Laundries joined in to help. Mind you, the park had been closed to the public for the entire 5 weeks at this point. They reopened to the public on October 19th, which, okay, might not mean anything, but just timing sounds very suspicious. The Laundries joined the search, walked about 45 minutes into the reserve, and found some skeletal remains and personal belongings of Brian. We don't know exactly what these remains are. We know it was definitely a jawbone and I think a femur, some other things. Guys, I don't know if it's just me, but all the pictures I see of the Laundries from this day, they do not seem as sad as I would assume parents would be if they were the ones that just found their son's body. Like, they weren't distraught. They weren't, obviously, we don't know, we weren't there. We don't see the live action, but from all the pictures, they seem a lot calmer than you would think. Is that just me? I don't know. Let me know down below. And within 24 hours, it was confirmed to be Brian through dental records. This sounds very fast. It sounds like this happened very, very fast. I know there are some cases that are still waiting on these kinds of results. Maybe, now listen, the police dropped the ball so many times. Maybe they just wanted to get this closed and done, and that's why they kind of rushed it. But other cases wait months, almost a year to even get this kind of information. So if it can actually be done that fast, why are we not fixing these resources for other cases? So some of the personal belongings of Brian's that were found amongst the remains was an empty backpack and a notebook. This notebook is still being investigated by the FBI. Today is January 16th, 2022. This happened October 20th, 2021, and this notebook is still being investigated. This area was underwater. Like, it flooded on the 23rd of September, and it had been underwater up until this point, is what the police say. And that's why they weren't able to extensively search this area up until this point. They had to wait for the water to recede. But I have so many questions when it comes to this. But we'll get there. We'll get there. So anyways, this notebook was apparently underwater. So that's why it's still being investigated, because they're trying to, like, fix the pages and see if they can get any detail out of it, if he explained what had happened with Gabby, if he left any note behind. The first initial coroner's report to come out was inconclusive, but then it was ultimately determined that cause of death was self-inflicted water pistol to the head. Now, another question. Unless it was this way, how do they know that? Because they only found a jawbone. But I'm going to assume that's what it was. But another question, I told you I have so many questions here. Another question, if it was that, wouldn't that have shattered all the teeth? I mean, obviously I'm not an expert in this situation, but you would think that impact would shatter all those teeth. So how did you get a dental record confirmation? I know, that's just where my mind goes. I know I said I wasn't going to put my personal opinion in it, and I've done pretty good, but now that we're at the end, like, I have so many questions. Please let me know if you can actually answer any of these, not just other speculations. Let me know any questions that you've had, but I've had so many questions, so many questions. Like the fact that it's pretty convenient that the day after the park opens to the public, the laundries all of a sudden want to help. After 5 weeks of doing absolutely nothing to find their missing son, 5 weeks, they were replanting their garden, they were staying in their house, watching TV, whatever. 5 weeks, they did absolutely nothing. The day after it opens to the public, they asked to join the case. They weren't asked, they asked to join the case. They walked in and immediately found his stuff. That's a little too convenient for me. They say it's because that area was underwater for so long, and Roberta and Chris knew this is where he liked to go, so they knew this is where to look. But what happened to the rest of the body? Like, I understand the heat in Florida and stuff really could accelerate decomposition, but it was 5 weeks. It was only 5 weeks. So let's say he did it right away on the 13th. It was 5 weeks. The body doesn't decompose that quick. I understand there's a lot of alligators and stuff in that area too, but anything I've read, any experts say that most animals will not eat something all the way down to the bone. Where are the rest of the bones? Another major question that's out there, where's the water pistol? And apparently when the FBI was informed on the 17th that Brian was gone missing, they went to the house to search and get the personal belongings to help the canine units, right? They also took, what's the word? They took inventory of Christopher's water pistol collection, and they noticed one was missing. They knew on that day that Brian had one of these. So even if they may not think he's going to do anything, they knew that the public was out looking for this guy. It had become such a high-profile case. Everybody in the world was searching for this guy. You knew he was armed, and you didn't inform the community that he was armed. I understand not wanting to try and do the whole vigilante thing, because in the States it's legal to carry. So people that are going looking for him might start carrying as well, and that could become a whole issue. I get that. But you knew people were out looking for him. What if somebody went and approached him and he turned on them? Clearly, he has these tendencies. He's already done it at least once, possibly 3 times, possibly more. But he's already done it for sure. How are you so convinced that he wouldn't turn on someone else? That is just the police dropped the ball so many times here, but this is just crazy. So is this why the laundries weren't out looking for him? They knew what he was going to do. They knew he was probably already gone. That camping trip, the 6th to the 8th, was that some sad goodbye trip? It would make sense as to their behavior versus the Petito family's behavior. And those pictures from that camping trip, Brian is smiling and so happy, loving life with his nephews. If he knew what he was going to do, then, like, that just makes it even sicker. Bringing it back to Kylen and Crystal. Now that we know he lost his life the same way they did, is it the same caliber? Are we questioning this? Are we going to bring this story back into play? Bertolino's statement, when he reported Brian missing, says that he was grieving and so upset and just had to go out. What was he grieving? Gabby's body hadn't even been found yet when he went on his hike. What was he grieving? How did he know she was already gone if she's innocent? This one wanted to make me scream. After Brian's body was discovered, Bertolino put out a statement saying that the Laundries just want peace and to bring closure to both families. Are you kidding me? Now you want closure for both families? Now you want peace? When the Petito family was begging you to help them and you stayed absolutely silent and didn't do a god darn thing about it, now you want to join up with them and have peace together and closure for both families? Come on. Now, I know we all are so mad at the Laundries for how they handled this and what they did to the Petito family, and obviously we can never really forgive them. But they lost a child as well, and as a parent, I can never imagine that heartache that they are going through, especially if they knew he was going to do it. And like Christopher even said in the one statement, well, Bertolino said that Chris told him that, like, I couldn't stop him. He was going out. So if they knew what he was going to do, could you just imagine sitting in your house thinking, like, did he do it yet? And everything like that. But at the same time, you didn't go out and look for him. You didn't go out and try and stop him. So I don't know if they didn't know. Either way, it's a loss of a child, and that's going to be heartbreaking. No matter what that child did, it is still your child. So my heart does go out to the Laundrie family in their grievance for their child, but we can't forgive the way they handled the situation. So the latest information we have is that the Laundries, Chris and Roberta, are now trying to fight in court for access to Brian's bank accounts, which hold $20,000. So remember the police stop when he had no money for a hotel? Remember when he drove home after he did whatever he did with Gabby and he spent $1,000 of her money? But you had $20,000 in your bank account? Where did that come from? How long have you had that? It would be very interesting to find out if it was possibly deposited after he came home or close around that area. Maybe the parents were, theories, allegedly, maybe the parents set it up for him to help him go on the run. And now that his body had been found, they want their money back. See what I mean about still so many unanswered questions? And I don't think we'll ever get them. Or at least we'll get them in a huge span of time. I don't think this case is going to ever be fully closed unless they can get something out of that notebook, some answers. Gabby's parents still haven't received all of Gabby's items from the Laundries and that storage unit, probably because the case is still open and active, waiting on that notebook, but they're still waiting and fighting in court for that stuff. Is Chris and Roberta ever going to be charged for anything? Is it going to come out that they knew? Now, there's a lot of people out there that don't even believe that's Brian and that he is still somewhere in this world. And to be honest, I'm not going to put no tinfoil hats on right now, okay? We are told that was him. We're going to believe that was him. But all I will say is that it would not surprise me if he's found in Mexico in a couple months. There's just too many unanswered questions when it comes to his body and what parts were found, how, like, where everything is. Sorry, I went on a tangent about the water pistol, the cops knowing he had one, and I forgot to elaborate on the point I was trying to make. So I understand that it was underwater, that area was underwater. So say he did what he did, drops to the ground, the gun drops to the ground, okay? Possibly the body got drifted away in the water and the animals pulled it away, whatever. But his body was found near his personal belongings. So obviously that notebook and the backpack and his shirt and stuff drifted the same distance as his body did, if it did drift. So where's the weapon? It should have been at least near the same area. And the fact that they couldn't even find this, they had so many resources, deep divers, metal detectors, infrared heaters and detectors, and like they had all the equipment for this. So I understand it was underwater, but they have equipment to search underwater. So the fact that the weapon and the body was not found until the water receded is very, very suspicious. And conveniently, the day after it opened up to the park, like there's so many questions, guys, so many questions. So what do you think? I'd love to hear your opinion down below. I loved hearing all the conspiracies. I mean, I was following this case since it broke. It was very interesting to me. I think because it's not such a cut and dry case, it's like everybody had information. Everybody was coming forward with something different every day is what it was the most interesting to me. I had to jump on and show you this. I saw this when I was watching one of these other live streams, but not that this really has anything to do with Ryan. It's not like he was reading them or whatnot, but how crazy is this that there is actually a set of books, one called Murder in Jackson Hole, one Murder in Moab, and Murder in the Tetons. These are all places that have played a role in this story. So I just thought that was so interesting. So have you heard about this case? Do you know anything that I haven't mentioned to add on to the timeline? I'm putting the written out timeline on my blog, which will be linked below. So if there's anything credible and confirmed that you have, let me know in the comments and I will add it on to that blog. Like I said, this video was hopefully just going to be a thorough timeline. I haven't seen one put out in one single video. I understand this is a very long video and maybe that's why it hasn't been put out. But the people that were covering it at the time, obviously you've seen just in this video how quickly things changed. So obviously when people were covering it, information was changing all the time. So I didn't see one thorough timeline and I really wanted to get that out for anybody that was interested and only knew bits and parts. Like even people around here, they still only know like the general consensus of the story. They didn't know all the details, and so like I started talking to them about it. So I'm sure there's other people online that are in the same situation. So hopefully this helped you if you were interested in learning more. And I really, really hope that we as a community, we've seen the power we have, we've seen what we are able to do, and we can continue to do this for other missing cases. There's so many still, so many. It's unbelievable. Every day I see another one, and another one, and another one. And police can only do so much. I'm not about the whole disbanding the police. They can only do so much. They have so much red tape to cut through. I understand the police in this situation dropped the ball, both in Florida and in Utah. But I do believe they need our help, and any credible information, clearly we saw how it can help solve a case, or at least find a missing person. And that's exactly what the Gabby Petito Foundation was created for. I'm obviously going to leave the whole website link down below, but the mission of the foundation is to address the needs of organizations that support locating missing persons and to provide aid to organizations that assist victims in DV situations through education, awareness, and prevention strategies. The Petito family is taking their tragedy and turning it into a positive by bringing these important issues to the forefront of the public eye. They've also created 2 scholarships of $1,000 each every year for someone graduating from Gabby's high school, and pursuing a future in the arts, whether visual or the performing arts, like Gabby was so passionate about. They changed the Facebook page from Find Gabby to Gabby Find the Missing, hoping to reunite the missing with their families. The Petito family is so thankful for all the media attention and outpouring support they received with Gabby's case, and they want to use this platform to pay it forward for other victims and missing persons. They've already been able to give a donation to the Teton County Search and Rescue Team, which was vital in finding Gabby's body, and others. They actually found multiple missing persons while they were looking for Gabby. This donation will be used to aid in the purchase of the necessary equipment to assist their mission, and this organization relies heavily on donations and corporate sponsorships to supplement their limited budget, as they all are volunteers. Since Gabby's disappearance and tragic death, thousands of people have reached out to the foundation to share their stories, seek support, and connect with fellow survivors. Nicole says, "We want to honor Gabby's memory and life by ensuring that no one ever has to experience what she did." In December, after the foundation received generous contributions from people around the world, they were able to give 3 significant donations. One to the National DV Hotline, which in October of 2021, the hotline experienced one of the highest contact volumes in a single month since their 25-year history, and will answer their 6 millionth call in early 2022. That is so sad, guys. We have to do better. Another donation went to Safe Space, and their mission is to empower victims of DV and their children through intervention, prevention, and advocacy services. They've been providing 500,000 safe nights of shelter to more than 40,000 victims, and this grant will be used to help open a 19-bed emergency shelter in Indian River County this year. And the third one went to the Aware Foundation. This foundation is assisting families of missing persons to raise awareness by distributing flyers, securing billboards, working with media, and holding events to get awareness out of other missing persons. Now, if you have the means to donate to this foundation, it's a fantastic cause. Obviously, I know right now times are hard for a lot of people, so if you do not have the means to donate, but you still want to support the foundation, like this video, share it, comment, push it out to the algorithm. Even other people's videos that are donating their AdSense to the foundation is one way that you can help support the foundation and not have to actually spend any money if you don't have it. So like, comment, share, get it out there, get all the videos out there. Let's get this foundation going. As well, if you or anybody you love and know are in a DV situation and any of these red flags you have seen before, please get help. I'll link that information down below as well. Plenty of resources for help. Again, if you want to deep dive into any of the situations I talked about, I'll link a ton of videos and articles down below as well. The description box is going to be max characters today. I'm not going to do my normal outro because this is not a normal video that I cover. So please just love yourself, love others, be kind, and be careful out there. Love you guys. Bye.